Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. I would just like to quickly make sure that everybody's at the right session. Effective cat herding. Yep. I see we were able to move most of you up to the front, so that's a good start already. Yes, we've already started cat herding, so that's good. My name is Suellen Beatty, and I'm the CEO of Sherbrooke Community Centre. And I'd just like to introduce our team here. This is Jill Vitale-Aussem, and she is our new CEO of the Eden Alternative, which you all learned yesterday. And then next to her, we have Kim Schmidt, who is the leader for resident care at Sherbrooke Community Centre, works with me. And then we have Mel Coppola, who is the owner of Hearts in Care, and she is joining us today. And Jill and Mel will be giving the afternoon session, and Kim and I will be giving the morning session. And what we are going to cover today is really a fair bit about culture change in the morning, and then about change leadership and self-care. Work-life balance in the afternoon. So we're very excited about the day, and thank you so much for coming to join us. Great. Thank you. Excuse me. Well, it really is an honor to be here, and we're really excited about the information that we have to share with you today. When I was talking to Chris Cheek, who is the board chair for the Eden Alternative, he had a saying that was similar to effective cat herding. He said, it's like trying to keep rabbits on a flatbed truck. And I thought, what a great way to describe trying to get leaders to move all together in the same direction. So thank you so much for the opportunity for us to be here today. So Peter Drucker, and I'm a big fan of his work, he said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And this is a really important concept going into the morning, because what I see people normally do is I see people work on strategies and technologies and policies and structure, and people forget to work on culture. And you all know that the Eden Alternative is about culture change. And without changing a culture, all the other things you do fall away over time. But when you really work to change a culture, that's when you start to see long-lasting change. So Peter Drucker knew this. And he also knew that all improvement requires change, but all change is not improvement, a very important distinction. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Sherbrooke before we get started this morning. And I'm going to go to the next slide, but not start it quite yet. We're going to show you a little 8-minute video. And this is a Canadian show, because Sherbrooke is in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, right in the middle of Canada. And the Alzheimer's Society of Canada was looking for some best practices in dementia care. And so CTV, they did a study where they found 6 centers across Canada where they sort of endorsed what was happening. And W5 is sort of like our news program. It's the 5 Whys. That's why it's called W5. And they do these terrible shows on exposés of nursing homes. Everybody's seen them, right? And they had done a couple of those, and then they said they wanted to do a good news story. So they approached the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, and they also approached Dr. Bill Thomas. And he said, well, go to Sherbrooke. So when we got the call from W5, I really didn't want to do the show because I was familiar with the kind of news stories that they do. But I didn't feel that we really should say no. And I also thought, it's important to get a message out there that's different than what the current news people are covering all the time about how Alzheimer's is so terrible and nothing can be done. So we did invite them into Sherbrooke, and our whole community participated. And one of the things we have at Sherbrooke is we have a child daycare called Oak Trees and Acorns. And I just want to ask a question before we get right deep into this. How many of you attended the session that Kim and I did yesterday? Okay, wonderful, thank you. For those of you, you might have a little bit of joy of recognition of some of the slides that we use. One of the things we love when we're away from home is when we get to see our elders, and we've used a few of those same pictures, so I hope you experience the joy of recognition. At any rate, our Oak Trees and Acorns kids were in W5 in the show, and they were all excited and they were going to be watching it. And I was trying to find out what was going to be in this show, and I found out about 2 days before the show aired. And I'm going to warn you right now, none of the kids got to watch this show, and you'll see why in a minute. But there's some really graphic stuff that I really apologize for because it's very traumatizing to see. But without further ado, I'm going to ask that we roll the film.
Welcome back to W5. For a couple of years now, we've been reporting about a national crisis, one that is expected to only get worse. It is violence in long-term care homes. Statistics uncovered by W5 found 10,000 resident-on-resident attacks across Canada in 1 year alone. And the most tragic of these cases result in murder. This violence often due to residents with dementia who didn't even know what they were doing. But what's the solution to this crisis in care? Well, we found one in Saskatoon, a care home that has taken a new approach and singled out by the Alzheimer's Society of Canada as one place that works. From inside nursing homes, shocking images, battered residents, loved ones abused. And on previous hidden camera investigations, W5 saw overcrowded and understaffed wards, residents heavily sedated or restless, wandering corridors alone. It has not been a pretty picture. We asked, is there a safe haven for the vulnerable among us who need it so badly? Hi, how are you? Suellen Beatty is the Executive Director of Sherbrooke Community Centre in Saskatoon. Not your typical nursing home. Children are the first sign they do things differently here. So you've got people of all ages here.
We have a child daycare. The kids are just going off inside Sherbrooke, maybe outside with some of the elders.
Sherbrooke's approach is called the Eden Alternative. The philosophy is simple. Physical challenges aside, the greatest plagues facing nursing home residents are loneliness, hopelessness, and boredom. So there are singing circles with the children. Pets have a role to play too.
And this is our art studio at Sherbrooke.
Remarkably, Sherbrooke has the country's first artist studio right inside a nursing home. And around every corner there is always music, an important part of dementia care as our brains find music very easy to recall. With its spacious rooms and hallways, Sherbrooke is designed to feel like a village, not like an institution.
There are 7 houses, and we've tried to make them look like houses too, to give the impression that we're walking down a street. And so each of the houses is home to 9 elders.
Sherbrooke has room for 100 seniors living with dementia, most of them with Alzheimer's.
If you look at even how we view Alzheimer's disease, society views it as a terminal, awful, terrible, terrible, awful thing. That person is still here. They still have lots of abilities. They have a disability that's helped them to function as high as they can.
And staff is critical to helping residents function. The ratio at Sherbrooke is 2 staff for every 10 residents, double what you would find in other homes. And they're trained to deal with dementia-related issues like preventing violence, a growing concern. W5 discovered that in 1 year alone, there were 10,000 cases of resident-on-resident abuse in Canada's care homes.
I think anytime you have people who are confused, they are going to feel a need to protect themselves in one way or another.
So how do you deal with that? How do you keep people safe?
One of the things we teach our staff is never force care. If someone says no, they mean no. Come again another time.
Never forcing care seems easy to do at Sherbrooke. Katrina, daily living assistant, explains.
We have maybe a little bit more time to be with the resident, that we concentrate on it being resident-directed care. So if they want something, it's their choice. If they want to sleep in until 11 o'clock in the morning, we let them do that. We work here in their home. we're just tagging along for an incredible journey. It's awesome.
Lazy yellow moon coming up tonight.
A family setting, pets, music, children around. It sounds and looks idyllic. But Sherbrooke has the stats to prove it works. Residents require fewer medications. They eat better, live longer, and have fewer violent incidents. They also seem to have more joy. It's a difficult thing to measure, but it's probably one of the most important things we were shown here.
So there's this photo album with pictures.
Take the story of Adina Sackman and her husband, Reinhold.
Here.
Oh, that's my husband.
Reinhold was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, confined to a wheelchair and heavily medicated. He could no longer recognize Adina.
During the night, he'd wake up and he'd say, "Who are you? And how did you get into my bed? Get out of here."
So he became very confused.
So he just threw me in and out of his life.
Right.
As the memories faded.
But within weeks of moving into Sherbrooke, Reinhold was off the heavy meds. He was even walking. And he had a sweet surprise for his wife.
And one day when I was here, I said I was going home, and I said, and he said, "No, don't go." And I said, "Yeah," I said, "I have to go home now." And he bent down and kissed me. Now, I was thrilled with that. This place gave our family a family back for a number of years because we celebrated our 60th wedding anniversary.
Eliminating drugs called chemical restraints has been shown to produce some interesting results.
Then we do get them off the psychotropic drugs, and we start providing choices and reasons to get up in the morning. People do something that we call rement. It's called rementia, and it's actually that you're improving your brain as opposed to the dementia, which says everything's just on a downhill slide.
So, is this kind of care more expensive? Surprisingly, living at Sherbrooke costs the same as the average care home in Saskatchewan, about $1,000 to $2,000 a month.
Hi there.
Suellen is so convinced of Sherbrooke's approach to dementia care, she moved her mother here.
And this is Ijen, my mother, and this is Sandy.
Ijen has dementia, and she's thriving.
So why does it work for her here?
It works for her here because people bother to find out that she wants to play the piano, and people bother to find out what her favorite songs are, and that it's important for her to go to church, and that she only wants to really wear black pants.
Does your mom know who you are?
No, but she really likes me.
Suellen practices what she preaches. She never reminds Ijen that she's her daughter, never corrects her mom, a crucial strategy for preventing aggression.
People are struggling to make sense of things, and then when you correct them, they feel bad, and they will get angry because you've made them look foolish.
You know, Suellen, I've asked other people who work in long-term care facilities whether they would put their loved ones, a mother or a father, in the home. And by and large, a lot of them have said no.
I understand that. I wouldn't have had my mother move into an institutional nursing home. I couldn't have done that.
See you later, okay?
Suellen has been working at Sherbrooke for more than 27 years. Her dedication earning her a Meritorious Service Award from the Governor General.
So if this model is so successful, why aren't more organizations doing it?
I think that the paradigm is changing. I think you are going to start to see more of this. It's interesting, it is believed that in healthcare it takes about 17 years for some sort of an innovation to become regular practice. But it's really hard work to do that culture change. And I think that when leaders are looking at doing this, it's like paddling a canoe upstream.
Now, the Alzheimer's Society has identified 5 other homes across the country that, like Sherbrooke, have moved to person-centered care, which may be the model for the future as the numbers of Canadians living with dementia keeps rising. And we'll be right back.
Okay, so that gave you a little, I'm sorry for the trauma pictures, because they really are hard to watch, but that gives you a little bit of an idea of our community, just so you know who we are and why we're here today. Our community is a very diverse community. There are 263 people who live on our one site and 60 who live on another site. And our community is very intergenerational and very multicultural, and we're trying to make it as diverse as possible because we know that diversity brings community. So I just want to show you a few pictures to give you an idea of things that you might not have seen on the video. This is Wes. He's one of our musicians. He's not a music therapist. He's actually a musician. And he's there with some of the kids from Oak Trees and Acorns. And, you know, having those kids there is just profoundly positive. They bring such incredible energy and joy. My mom actually passed away shortly after that show was done. And her greatest joy, she'd been a teacher for many years, and when she would see those kids, her eyes would just light up and she would smile. And the kids would come into her house every day and she would read to them. She would read a story, and of course it was really kind of fun because they would correct her, but they got away with correcting her and telling her she'd repeated a page or something. But it was so meaningful and brought her such joy. The next one is our kids in one of our partnership schools. We try to have children of all ages in Sherbrooke, and so these folks are helping us in our gardens and learning about gardening and planting plants. Lots of skills that kids don't learn anymore. These are our elders outside. You can see some of the kids out there with them. We have over 150 of our elders who garden, and our gardening season is very short, so it's really, really important that we have everything ready. In fact, back home right now, they're getting all those boxes ready because our growing season's very short. But this is a very interactive thing. The elders, every elder has a volunteer that would help them with their garden box, and sometimes it's one of the kids. This is Grant, and he is collecting composting materials for the gardens. And so we're trying to do some real life stuff from start to finish, where we have, you compost your stuff, you get it in the garden, you plant the garden, you have a big harvest. And in our backyard, we actually share a park with 3 schools. And we worked with the city to create a community garden. And the community garden, this is Donna out in the garden, and the community garden is just so incredible. You'll see our elders out there in the evening just mixing in with the neighbors and talking to them about their gardens, and it's just such a normal thing to do. And so we still kind of organize this garden, give the plots away, but it's one way of bringing the community in. This is my mom. Listening to her iPod, and there's kind of a funny story about this. I have 3 older sisters, and my one sister, Jane, is very, very musical, and she has the best memories of doing music with my mom. She knows all her favorite songs, so I asked her to get a little iPod ready for my mom, and she didn't come, it didn't come, and I said, Jane, what's taking so long? And she said, well, there's just so many songs to download. And I said, well, how many songs have you got? And she said, 1,000. And I said, oh my goodness, Jane, you could have chosen 10, and Mom would have listened to them over and over and over again. Anyways, my mom had 1,000 songs on her iPod. It could play forever, and it just brought her incredible joy. This is Donna working in our gift shop, and it's called the Tumbleweed Gift and Thrift. And if you're looking for an idea to raise some money and have affordable shopping for your elders, this is a good one. We get some new stuff in there that people buy, but we get all this used stuff. And we have a group of volunteers who put this all together. And all of the money, of course, goes to the foundation, which goes to help the elders. But this is meaningful work for people to do. And so always the volunteers are paired with one of our elders to work in the gift shop. This is a picture of an aquarium. And it's just an example of staff, when they're highly engaged, get ideas and they just make them happen. And this is an aquarium where somebody wanted to hatch monarch butterflies. And so this thing went on forever. We had to order the butterflies or the cocoons and then hang them up and do all the things. I don't know all the steps. But finally, we did release the monarch butterflies, and it was a really exciting day when that happened. All the school kids were there, and the media was there. And of course, the monarchs go all the way down to Mexico, and then for some silly reason, they come all the way back to Canada. And so we created a butterfly garden so that we would attract them, and they'd have home when they came back. This is some of our elders with school kids in what was our very first art studio. We since expanded this, but we had a show at the Mendel Art Gallery, which is our national gallery in Saskatoon. And these school kids looked at the art of the elders, and they wanted to come and meet them. And so they did. They got together, and the artists were able to share their stories with the school kids. These are some of our artists on opening night at the Mendel Art Gallery. This was one of the most fun days ever that we had at Sherbrooke. And if you're interested in watching the documentary, it's called A Year at Sherbrooke, and it's on the National Film Board of Canada website. And it's about a 55-minute long documentary that the NFB did of our art program. And, well, it's not a program. We had an artist in residence, and we're very engaged in the arts. And these are the Snowbirds. This is just my cue to tell you we're home for the veterans. We have the Veterans Village at Sherbrooke, and I think we'll tell you a little bit more about the village. In the video, you saw the men eating in one of the houses. Those were our veterans, and Katrine, the daily living assistant, in there. Oh, by the way, we don't have 2 staff for every 10 elders. Sandy Ronaldo on W5 saw 2 people in at lunch helping, and so she made the conclusion that we had a ratio of 1 to 5. Our ratio is about 1 to 6 to 7, just depending on the case mix of the elders. At any rate, Katrine said something that I thought was really important. She said, we work in the elders' home. They don't live in our workplace. And I think that is a paradigm shift. That's a sign of culture change when you see your workplace as someone's home primarily. And so I just wanted to reinforce what she had said. Snowbirds are Canada's, I'll just go back, they are our Air Force. And you all know we have tiny armed forces, right? This is probably the whole thing. We rely on you folks, just so you know. Anyways, these guys come and do a special show for the veterans, and it's really an honor. And so our whole community, here we are, all of us out there dressed in red, and the whole community's out there. There's probably 500 people out to watch the Snowbirds. And then the Skyhawks come too, and they parachute into the park and land in the middle of everybody, and it's an exciting day. But it's just an example of, Dr. Thomas says, we become a whole world for our elders. And so bringing in as much as you can from the community is important. This is Esther, and this is what's so nice about looking at these pictures. You know Esther, you love Esther, and then you get to see Esther up here on the screen. This is our Vintners Club, and so she's just showing the fruits of the labor. This is an Aboriginal drumming group. This is a partnership we have with another school, and they come in and do all kinds of things. We have a house in our village where 10 Aboriginal people live, and all the staff are Aboriginal so that we can support that particular culture. And what we've done with people with dementia is really a remnant of the medical model. Segregating people with dementia is, it comes out of that surgical ward, that medical ward, the pediatrics ward. This is not medical model. This is based on culture. This is people who want to live together and share the same traditions and cultures. And so it's a far cry from the medical model. And as I said yesterday, we're working very hard at Sherbrooke to desegregate our people with dementia. I remember when my mom moved into the house that she came to live in, she looked at me, she said, all of these people are crazy. And, I looked around and I looked through her eyes and I thought, oh, Mom, what have I done? Because she couldn't figure out what to do because she had no real good role models around her. So it became very clear to me that people with dementia do better with people who don't have dementia, and that a diverse mixed community is our way to success. So we're working hard to open the doors and get people mixed up. The next slide is our grade 6 class. It's called Ijen for intergenerational. And our Sherbrooke is actually the classroom for these kids. There's 25 of them. They come to Sherbrooke every day. They are chosen from, usually about 75 kids apply to be part of this classroom. And so everything they do, their entire curriculum happens at Sherbrooke. And they have a really terrible, this day, this is one thing that we do just to warm the soil and tell everybody that we love them. After the September long weekend, we come out really early, we light a fire, and we meet all the staff with coffee, and Tim Hortons coffee, by the way, and hot chocolate and apples and things like that to say, welcome back from the summer. I mean, that's how short our summer is. And we're so glad that everybody's done their holidays and you're all back, and go in and make somebody's day awesome. And so we come out and greet the staff and tell them that we love them. And this is us greeting the grade 6 class on their first day of school. This is their classroom in the basement of Sherbrooke, but they use all of Sherbrooke as a class, and so they don't spend too much time in here. But this picture is Dr. Jody Grant, who is an elder who lives at Sherbrooke, who taught at the university and lost most of the meaning in her life when she had a terrible car accident. And when we got that grade 6 class based at Sherbrooke, she had a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and she goes down into the classroom every day, and she's part of the literature part. She reads to the kids, and they talk about literature, and it has changed her life. And so we're trying to find something like that for all 263 people who live in our one home and 60 who live in the other. If you can find a reason for all those people to get out of bed in the morning, that's what we're after. And then sometimes we take people out. Well, we do as much as we can because that there's so much variety and spontaneity when people get out into the community. So our staff are amazing. They take people home with them. This is one of our staff's acreages, and sharing their horses. Okay, so we would like to do a learning circle right now. And everybody familiar with the learning circle? You're all at nice round tables, which is beautiful. If you're at a table with all by yourself, it's going to be a really boring learning circle. So, unless you really like to talk to yourself, there probably won't be any arguments. But if you could join a table, if you're at one by yourself or with 2 or 3 people, your experience will be so much more meaningful, and we intend to do a few of these this morning. But a learning circle is a circle where everybody gets a voice. We ask someone to volunteer. We give the question, and actually I'm going to give it to you right now so you can think about it. We're going to ask you to share an innovative practice that you're proud of from the home or the place where you work. And so that's what the question is. And usually we ask for a volunteer to start, and then the volunteer determines which way the circle goes. And there's no crosstalk, because what we're trying to do is give every single person a chance to be heard. And then generally at the end of a learning circle, you would open it up for discussion, and it would take its own course. So we're going to give you about 5 minutes here to do a learning circle. So that means that every person at the table gets about 1 minute, so just so you know. But the question is, share an innovative practice you're proud of from the home where you work, or the place where you work. Okay, go. Wow, that is really innovative, and something probably all of us can do, right? Create a drive-in movie experience for an elder by putting a big sheet up on your building and inviting the community in. What a wonderful one. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else have one they'd like to share? Can't see that good. Oh, yeah, there's one. Thank you. I don't know if I can talk about it, do you want to come up here? No. So you folks have figured out a way to share all these cool ideas from each home to each home, right? which is absolutely awesome. And you also promoted somebody doing something so spontaneous to reinforce it. So yeah, lovely idea. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, thanks everyone. So we're going to move on to talk about culture. So what is culture? What is this thing that Peter Drucker says eats strategy for breakfast? It's the thing that can stand in our way of actually reaching our vision unless we work to change the culture. So culture is an intense and invisible force there to perpetuate itself forever. And I absolutely love this quote. It's from Lou Tice at the Pacific Institute. And it tells you that the purpose of culture is so that the culture never changes. And that's why it's so hard to change. Culture is just meant to preserve itself. It's the rules, the norms, the way we do things around here. And so that's why it is so very challenging to change. But we're going to share with you our culture change strategies, our 5 keys that we've developed at Sherbrooke that have helped us to go along this Eden journey. So culture is a direct representation of the group's thinking. And it's sort of the way we behave and act in accordance to the truth as we perceive it to be. And that's an important statement because we all perceive the truth to be slightly different. And so culture takes that into account. What people think really determines their actions. And so that's where we really need to put our energy into how people think. Because thinking forms words, words lead to actions, and pretty soon you've got a culture. And if your culture is not warm and receptive, it's really hard to introduce new ideas, specifically some of the ideas in the Eden alternative philosophy, because they clearly don't work in the institutional setting. And so we're trying to move out of that institutional culture into one that, of course, we all know is called the human habitat. But a long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right. This is one of my favorite quotes by Thomas Paine. He's an educator. And this is similar to, well, this is always the way we've done it. It's always been done this way. Or another way of saying this is, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? People don't even recognize what's wrong with the way that we do things now. Perfect example of this is it did not dawn on me for 25 years that it was wrong to segregate people with dementia. Never even crossed my mind until somebody posed that to me one day. And so, of course, when you learn something different, you're expected to do something different. I have this story about a little girl and her mom cooking a ham for Easter. And she's there in the kitchen, and her mom cuts the end of the ham off and puts it in the pan. And the daughter says to her mom, well, Mom, why did we cut the end of the ham off? And she says, we've always done it that way in our family. I don't really know. Let's go ask Grandma. So they go ask Grandma, and they said, we're making this ham. We cut the end off. We're not sure why we did that. And she says, oh, because that's the way we've always done it in our family. I don't know. Let's go ask Great-Grandma. So they go and they explain the situation to Great-Grandma and say, we're cutting the end off the ham. Why are we doing this? And she looks at them. She says, I have no idea why you're doing it. I never had a pan big enough. So that's culture. These things get passed down. They're the way we do things, and some of them make absolutely no sense. But when you go to change those things, it can be very challenging. So I kind of like this next one. I don't know how it started either. All I know is that it's part of our corporate culture. And so if the leader comes in and says we're not wearing these hats anymore, even though people hated it, there will be resistance to change, because that's what culture does. So culture is what happens when leaders are absent. It's really how the place runs on a regular basis. It's how we do things around here, and it's the unwritten rules and norms. And so when you first come to a new place to work, you don't know the culture. And you try very hard to learn the culture so that you can fit in and belong, because we all have this great need to belong. When I first came to Sherbrooke back in 1987, I was the director of nursing. And one of the experiences that I had is I came to the cafeteria during my first week of work, and there was a table of people. There was only people at one table in the cafeteria, so I went and sat down, and the whole conversation stopped. And I kind of looked around uncomfortably, and I said to the person next to me, well, shouldn't I be sitting here? Like, what have I done? And she said, Suellen, this is the housekeeping table. So I learned that day something about the culture. I learned that we were all in silos and that the director of nursing did not sit with the housekeepers. And so these are the kinds of things that you learn about the culture. And once you learn these things, you have a sense of belonging. So sometimes you don't want to change them because it took you a while to figure them out. Culture is how informal decisions get made on a day-to-day basis. These are the automatic things. It's how we act under pressure. Well, we all want to be this person who conducts themselves in the most sort of honorable fashion. But sometimes when the rubber hits the road, the real culture comes out and people yell at each other and bad things can happen. But under pressure is when you sometimes see the real culture revealed. And it's the glue that holds the organization together. So this is a description of why culture is so important. A cold or defensive culture can cause people to not share their gifts and talents, and they resist change. A warm or constructive culture has people wanting to give their best and improve on things. So if you have a cold culture, you can't implement change. If you have a warm culture, you can start to implement change. So of course, the very first step is really about warming the soil, which is what we learn in the Eden alternative. Don't do anything till you warm the soil, and we'll talk more about that. This is a quote from a British Columbia long-term care administrator when I was talking to him about Eden training. He said, I believe in professional development, but every time I send people away for education, nothing ever changes. And so, it's interesting because this leader did not realize that they were responsible for the culture and that sending a care aide to an education center session could not change the culture of an organization, that it really is a leadership job. And education is critically important so everybody understands the big why of where we're going, but culture cannot be changed unless you have a group of really committed people going along the same road. You can't change culture unless the leaders are fully committed. So leadership is essential, and this is the definition that we use of leadership. It's the ability to influence others and have them move toward a chosen vision. Without leadership, nothing much ever changes. And this is really true. When I watch the Eden alternative culture not take root, I see it's because sometimes a lack of leadership skill within the organization to actually lead the culture change. And it's not an easy thing to do. Max Dupree wrote a book called Leadership is an Art, and it's a very old book, and it's a book I really love. He said the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. The last is to say thank you. In between the two, the leader must become a servant and a debtor. That sums up the progress of an artful leader. So this was a quote from the CEO of Herman Miller, the chair company. Probably had something to do with the chairs you're sitting on today. Very successful company. But one of the things we do to try to do this is we do cultural assessments, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So Lou Tice again, one of my favorite mentors, he's since passed away. He created the Pacific Institute out of Seattle. If any of you are looking for fabulous leadership training, we've really had a good experience with that. But he says, we act in accordance with the truth as we perceive and believe it to be. And we know that we've talked about ageism at this conference. And of course, this is very true when we think about ageism. If we perceive getting old to be a terrible thing, that becomes the truth for us, and then we act accordingly. And that's when we're trying to do everything we can not to age, rather than to sort of embrace this wonderful period of elderhood in our lives. So our thoughts form our actions, and so we need to change the way we think. I'm not really going to go into this very much, but this is a circumplex created by Human Synergistics, and they're a company that measures culture. And if you have a lot of, I'll just show you the next slide because it's easier to explain. So the top circumflex there has very little blue in it, and the blue is that constructive, lovely, warm culture. The red and the green are sort of the aggressive kind of culture in an organization. And the green is passive defensive, and the red is aggressive defensive. And then in the second one, the middle circumplex, you see that the blue has grown. Somebody's done a lot of culture change work, and the blue is getting bigger and bigger, telling you that this is an organization that's going to start to accept change. And then when you get down to the bottom one, and actually there are descriptors of all of these things. I'm just going to whip through them because it's basically what I just said. But when you get down, to that last circumplex, you see that the blue is really big. And so that's where you get people who are adaptable, they're goal-oriented, they have high efficacy, which means they get things done. They accept accountability, and they are fearless. And that's what we all want in our homes and the places where we're caring for elders. So this is what makes the best place to live and the best place to work. So we've done a lot of this culture change work, and this is just a slide I showed yesterday that measured our engagement of our staff. And Sherbrooke the green is engagement, and the yellow is kind of like a warning, and the red is totally disengaged. And we're the highest green, and we're compared to the top performing companies that this company has tested, Aon Hewitt. And so Sherbrooke is scoring higher. So we've done something right. And of course, when you get highly engaged staff, they give this discretionary effort to you, and you start to see all these amazing things happen. Sorry, I'm just gonna move that one. So this was a quote from Albert Einstein, and he said, "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." And of course, we talked about when we're changing the culture, we're actually changing the way we think, which then in turn leads us to act in a different way. And so we really need to realize that it's leadership that is going to change, lead this culture change. We need to take people towards a new vision. We cannot use the same style of leadership that created the cold culture and expect a warm one because we have a different vision or strategy. And I often see leaders come out of Eden Alternative. I often see leaders come out of the Eden Alternative training just say, "Oh, I have a new vision now. I'm going to cram this one down everybody's throat." and then we can't figure out why that doesn't work, right? And of course, leadership is the first thing that has to change if you're trying to implement this culture change. And so I see that more often than not, that people get really excited about this vision, but don't change their leadership style. So the Eden Alternative Golden Rule is as management does unto staff, social staff do unto elders. And so this tells us a little bit about how leaders should be conducting themselves. So if you want your staff to be in close relationship, loving your elders, doing all these creative things, that's how you have to be as the manager, as the leader. You have to love your staff. And I had this experience where I decided at a staff meeting I was going to tell the staff I loved them. And so I did. And there was like just dead silence, right? And everybody just kind of stared at me or else didn't. And one brave person stood up and said, "But which one of us do you love the most?" So kind of broke the ice. So, I regularly now can tell the staff, I love you guys. I love what you do. I love how you love the elders. It's so great to be on this journey with you. So how do we create this constructive culture where change and improvement are possible? How do we create a place where people really want to work? Because if you have a place where people really want to work, they're going to be, that's going to rub off in the elders, and it's going to have a big effect. It takes a lot of focus. Look at that seagull. And I know lots of leaders get distracted really, really easily. We've talked about that at this conference too. But you have to focus because culture change doesn't happen by accident. I was supposed to stop for a learning circle, wasn't I, Kim? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to have another learning circle now. Is everybody good? Are the rest of you okay too? Okay, awesome. Okay, so this is our second learning circle question. So if you can get yourself in a group, how warm or constructive do you think the culture of your home is? On a scale of 1 to 10, say 10 is extremely warm and one is icy cold. Nothing changes there. So go ahead. How warm is your culture on a scale of 1 to 10? Okay, folks. Are you ready to come back into the big group? So, does anybody out there want to share something that they shared about their culture, something that was really great? Somebody with a warm culture want to share? Yes. Are you just... Oh, okay. It's not safe to scratch your head in here. I'll single you out. Yes, there you are. Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Wonderful. So an example of what can happen in a warm culture, right? With cold ice cream. Okay, anybody else? You bet. Right. Wonderful. Great tip for everybody. Okay, they'll come for free. That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Okay, anybody else have a little story about culture or something that they think the group would benefit from? Yes. So you open up happy hour so others can come, and that's a sign of real relationships, right? When people want to do that. So that's a sign of a very warm culture. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. It reminds me, Ian Percy, who was a culture change person, said that a policy is a BandAid over a mistake. And, you know, it's like one time something happens, and so we make a policy so that it never happens again. And then that is what we focus on. So good for you folks. You saw in that circumplex that in a warm culture, people take risks. And so if we have to keep everything safe all the time, that's a sign that we're not quite there. So thank you for sharing that. Awesome. Okay, so our greatest danger in life is permitting the urgent thing to crowd out the important. And when that happens, you're at risk. Here we are being presented with the wheel, and these guys say, no thanks, we're too busy. And so you can miss out incredible opportunities when you're not focusing on what's important. And, you know, I think of managers who spend all their time solving the problems for their staff, putting out fires, instead of empowering their staff to do it. And they're really missing the important work that they're to do as leaders. Our leaders, as leaders, we're to grow people and empower them to make the changes, not do everything ourselves. So we're going to take you very quickly through Sherbrooke's culture change journey to an intentional culture that puts the elders first. And when we have new staff coming to Sherbrooke, we say to them, you know, we've worked really hard to create this intentional culture. You are welcome to join us to improve it, but not to change it, not to change it back into the institutional kind of culture, because we worked very hard. And lots of people will come to Sherbrooke now, and they don't appreciate kind of all the hard work or the struggle that we went through to get there. They just think things are the way that they are. But culture can slip back if you're not tending to it all the time. So we changed our mission. And our mission says that we create a community that supports each person to live a full and abundant life. And the reason I put our mission up there is to tell you that we actually changed it. Because it used to say we created a community that supports people to live full and abundant life. And we realized if we're talking about person-directed or about each person, about identity, autonomy, we had to talk about each person. So we actually changed our mission. This is our short vision, and this is the one the staff know. They say we're creating the best place to live and the best place to work in that order. And so the order is really, really important because unless you have that order, you're probably not going to attract and keep the staff that you really want who are going to put the elders first. So our big challenge was really to move out of that medical and institutional model to a person-directed model, where the people we serve direct their own lives, grow, find joy and meaning, and have connections, autonomy, security, and identity. And you will recognize those as the 7 domains of well-being. And so that was our big challenge, was to move out of the institution into the human habitat. And we knew we required this really constructive culture in order to get there. So we worked to become a values-based organization, and we asked the staff to create values or guiding principles for us in providing care. And so these very quickly are, we see each person as an individual. We try to make things as normal as we can for that person and as normal as it would be in their culture. And then realistically, how do we do this? Because we're short of resources. I wish we had 2 staff for every 10 people. But we're all short of resources. But when we think with an attitude of abundance, it's absolutely amazing how that changes things and resources appear. The staff really loved, sorry, I didn't put them up here. The staff really loved these principles, and we started to use them in care planning and in care conferences, and we put them up on the walls everywhere. We talked about them, and they really liked them a lot, so they wanted to create one more set of principles. And so we called these ones Care 2000. And it's kind of funny now when I look back, because our goal was by the year 2000, these principles would be embedded in the organization. And of course, now we're at 2018, right? I guess I stayed a long time. These are the principles the staff came up with. And they did this in committee. And they went back out to the staff and said, is this what we want to do? And so, we said we want to continually be improving things. We want to communicate with everybody, give lots of feedback. And of course, I attended a really cool session yesterday where we talked about if you wanted to create a bad outcome, how would you do that? And we were talking about basically resistance to change. And one of the strategies you would use is don't give any feedback, don't give any information, no communication, right? So our staff are saying this is important to create a warm culture. We said we're all accountable for ourselves and actually each other, that we will conduct ourselves with respect and dignity always, and we will be empowered people, we will actively participate, and we will put safety first. And this safety one got added years later because our staff were sort of like cowboys out there. They would just take risks. They would do whatever they needed to do what elders wanted, and they were getting hurt. And so we had to kind of rein things back in and say, no, you're never allowed to hurt yourself to put the elder first. That's the bright line in the sand. We have to stop right there. So we had to roll the film back a little bit. So the Eden Alternative was adopted by us in 1999, so we're coming up to 20 years pretty soon. And they have culture change. They aren't stages, they're just sort of, the personal transformation, the organizational transformation, and the physical. And of course, we've used all of those to help us to do this. But we also created, by going through those stages, we also created these keys to leadership, to culture change that we're going to start sharing with you now. So we have 5 keys that we think lead to changing a culture. And we keep editing these and changing them a little bit when it's like reverse engineering what you did. you sort of get to this point in the road, and then you say, well, what did we do in order to get here? And this is a little bit of reverse engineering of how we did our culture change. So the very first one is leadership style. And you'll remember I said nothing happens without leadership, and it really doesn't. So the leader has to have a compelling why. People do not follow a leader who doesn't know why they're going, where they're going. And so you have to explain why. The next thing is something you might want to look up. It's called Newtonian leadership. And it's the one that creates that really defensive kind of culture. That is passive or aggressive. Remember I showed you those circumplexes? Those ones with very little warmth in them are usually led by Newtonian leaders. And they say in healthcare that's primarily the type of leadership we are seeing. It's very top down. So leaders must learn to adopt a Whiteheadian style. And this is the one that we're going to be talking about through the culture change experience. And this is where the leaders are really flexible and they empower the staff. And we'll share some examples. And then the leader has to intentionally change the culture. It doesn't just happen on its own. I always tell administrators, no amount of goodwill will just make this happen. It doesn't just happen because you want it. You have to do some very specific things to do it. More on the leadership style. The leader has to be inspiring. I was going to say perspiring. There's a fair bit of that goes on too. But it should be inspiring and persistent, determined, energetic, honest, forward-thinking. It's really about having integrity, right? The leader has to have lots of stamina because it is a hard journey. The culture change journey is probably the most challenging thing that I've been involved in. And the leader really must move towards and have a high commitment to a shared vision. And so the leader really has to engage the staff in sharing that vision. So leaders get inspired. Sorry, I didn't put the rest up. I'm just reading from my own notes. You might benefit from them as well, hey? If I click the clicker, sorry about that. I want to do another learning circle right now about leadership. And we've talked a little bit very quickly about leadership style, changing from that top-down bureaucratic authority instead into one where we empower everybody to make decisions that belong to them. And so I want to ask you, what do you need to change about your current leadership style, if anything? I know there's some perfect leaders out there, but share with each other one thing you'd like to change about your leadership style, and we'll just take 5 minutes to do that. Okay, go. Okay, what brave soul is going to share with us what they want to change about their leadership style? Yesterday I said mine was impatience. That's one thing I want to change. Yes?
I struggle sometimes with being present. With being present.
Oh.
I have a staff member in my office and they're talking to me and I'm going, I'm listening as I'm typing.
Yeah.
And there's just so much to get done in the course of the day. Sometimes I have to slow myself down and remember to be right there and just be present with who I'm talking to.
That's such a good one. The tendency is to let the urgent crowd out the important, and the important is that person right there in front of you. So that's a really good one, yeah. And how to make people feel valued, to give them your full attention. Thank you. Anybody else got one?
Yes, I do. I'm an activity coordinator, and I work with a lot of my CNAs. And I have a program set up where we do individualized activities with our dementia patients. And sometimes I take advantage of the fact that the staff knows what to do. And I need to change that and get them more involved and start asking them, because if anybody knows the residents, the CNAs does, and start asking them how they would do it, what tasks that they think would be better, and go with that. Stop assuming that they already know what to do. And I think that I really need to work on that.
Wonderful. So you want to be a leader who consults and includes people more. Yeah, that's lovely. Absolutely. Communicating and giving feedback. Very nice. Thank you. Anybody else have one they'd like to change? Oh, I'm sure you're all just awesome leaders out there. No, I really mean that seriously. I think you are, and that's probably why you're in the session, because you're interested in improving your leadership skills. So yes, key number one out of the 5 is leadership style. And so we want to move away from that top-down bureaucratic authority and instead to one that facilitates and grows the leaders around them, empowers staff, and really facilitates what it is other people do. So that's the first key. Kim?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim, and I'm going to take us through the next 3 keys. These keys, as Suellen said, there's 5 of them, and they're just sort of an assembly of all of the things that we've done over the years to create this warm culture. And at the end, on the app, if you look for this session, and at the very bottom of the slides is a handout that summarizes all of the 5 keys. And I also have a few hard copies of that as well if anyone wants those. So we'll get going with key number 2, which is warming the soil and building trust. And there's some really specific things that we've learned over the years of ways that you take this beyond just being one of the terms used in the Eden education to actually something that comes alive. First is education, and it is one of the most important things you can do to warm your soil and to build trust. And so our staff, a lot of our staff go through the 3-day Eden training. We choose staff to go through that who have good attendance, who are leaders, who have positions in our home so they're committed to working with us. We don't offer it to people who we're not enthused about their performance or we're trying to convert. We hope to help those people find another place to work where it might be a better fit for them. So we focus on our high performers and getting them educated. So there's a 3-day training, but we also do, we have some videos made about the Eden principles. We have other education sessions we offer on that. We have a 2-day Untie the Spirit, which talks a lot about approaches with people with dementia and meeting their unmet needs. We do the gentle persuasive approaches, which is to help people avoid protective responses with residents if they don't understand what they're doing with them. And as Suellen mentioned, we invested heavily in that Pacific Institute Investment in Excellence training for all of our managers and other staff. Mitzvahs. We encourage our staff to do mitzvahs for each other, and those are good deeds or charitable acts, and they're anonymous. So a really good example of this, for a period of time, Suellen was struggling with a really sore shoulder. And every day, I don't know if any of you have ever been to Saskatoon, but we have the worst, most terrible winters you've ever seen. And we come out from work and our cars are covered in ice and snow. We have to get these big scrapers out and scrape the snow off them. Suellen would come out from work when she was struggling with that, walk to the parking lot. Her entire car was cleaned off, ready to go home. Never knew who did it. Nobody ever wanted to take credit for it. But those are the kinds of things that we would call a mitzvah, so a good deed. Random acts of kindness. These happen all the time in our home, and we encourage them, and they create warmth and trust. I have a coworker, Deb Schick. She's presenting in one of the next rooms right now. She worries constantly about that I don't drink enough water. And so she sends me things on Facebook, and she will often leave nice cups on my desk, like with straws, and they're pretty. And so that's to help me drink more water. And I view it as a random act of kindness in a way. She's trying to help me do better in my water drinking. And she also brought me a light for, those lights for seasonal affective disorder. She brought me one of those recently. So, but those are the kinds of nice things that we try and do for each other. We have Caught Doing Good awards. So these are, we have one specific award that there's a perpetrator and a sleuth. So you catch someone doing good, and you nominate them for this award. And these are things that are kind of above and beyond what we would expect of our staff. So they're big money-saving ideas. They are really innovative ideas, or actually beyond ideas. They're things that staff do. So the most recent one we gave out was to one of our recreation staff. We had a fellow move in with us a couple years ago, and he came to us actually in a coma. And there was not really a lot of hope for his recovery at that time. We've watched this amazing thing unfold, and you wouldn't believe it, but I saw him walking down the hall towards me last week. Amazing. He's walking, he's talking. And when he had his accident, he was on the way to Table Mountain. It's a ski hill in our province. It's kind of a joke because it's just a little, it's not really a mountain. It's just a little lump. But he was on his way to ski. He was a snowboarder, and he was on his way there, and they had a motor vehicle accident, and he was severely injured. So he has this love of snowboarding, and a couple weeks ago, our recreation staff and one of our physical therapists got him up to Table Mountain on a sit ski, and he skied again. So she was nominated by one of her coworkers for this award, so we were happy to present it to her. So we give the nominator $50 and the award winner $100. And it's a small amount of money for really recognizing people, and we recognize them in a way that they want to be. Sometimes it's in a big group, sometimes it's with a small group of staff. We have annual reviews. We don't do performance reviews at Sherbrooke. We do annual reviews. We have, it's really a sit down between the manager and the staff member, and it's mandatory. We ask our managers to meet with every single staff member they have, spend about an hour of time with them, and they go through, we change it every year. Sometimes they go through the principles of care. Right now, we're helping them go through the domains of well-being, so it's more of an education tool. We handle performance in a different way. We do performance management as performance issues come up. So we do either coaching or discipline or whatever is appropriate for the situation, but we don't do it as a performance review. We do celebrations and rewards. So we have a lot of celebrations. Even recently, our laundry staff celebrated Julius Caesar Day. So they came through the home and they're dressed in togas with garlands on their head, and they didn't have actual Caesars with them. I don't know, is that a thing here? Like, I guess you'd call it a Bloody Mary maybe here. We have Caesars, which is vodka and clamato juice, not tomato, but clamato. And so we're hoping this year they come with actual Caesars with them. We do long service awards. We're doing ours coming up in a couple of weeks, and we often will have staff. We're recognizing between 5 and I think this year we have a 40-year service award to give, and that's not uncommon. We have a lot of people stay with us a long, long time. We give money to our staff if they have clean safety records, their team. If they have no time loss injuries in their area and they've held all their weekly safety meetings, we give them some money so that they can have a party or do something fun. Transparency, we share everything. We, even if we don't know what's going on, we will have a staff meeting and say that we are not sure how a change is going to impact us, or that we don't have a plan yet. And it, I think, is reassuring to the staff and builds trust, because I think they often think we have a master plan, and we don't often. We do have a strategic plan and we do have a vision, but we're often, as Suellen says, often we're laying the path as we walk it. And I love that idea, because if you have to have a master plan all the time, you can hardly get there. You just have to figure things out as you go. We share our minutes with our staff, our budget information with our staff, and so they have a lot of transparency of what we're doing and what we're wanting to happen in the home. And we model the way. So you will see us picking up garbage, mopping up spills, there's sort of not a division of labor there. We do all have our own jobs, but when it comes to things that happen, problem solving, we're expecting everybody to pitch in. and we role model that for our staff. We really try and, in our day-to-day decision making, make sure we're clarifying the values and why we're doing things, why we're performance managing. It's because a value has been violated or policy has been violated. We participate in everything, so even pajama day, our leadership team, we wear our pajamas to work. So we try not to have these different divisions between management and senior management and staff, and try and level the playing field. What else do we do here? Oops. Gratitude projects and boards. So a lot of our neighborhoods, you will see gratitude trees where people put up what they're grateful for. We'll do learning circles on that, what you're grateful for. It's a great way to start a team meeting in a positive way. What are you most grateful for about our team? What are you most grateful for about the people that you work with? We measure the warmth. We do the Eden warmth surveys annually. We do the employee one, we do the family one, and the resident one. And we measure ourselves against the benchmark and against our past survey results. And we do what's called a Gallup engagement survey. It's a 12-question survey, might be useful to you. It's in a book called First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. And it's 12 questions that will measure how engaged your staff are. And we do this every year. We bribe them to do it. We give them, we have a staff meeting, and we get everyone captured there, and then they do the survey, and then we send the surveys out to the neighborhood, and if they have 90% participation, then we buy them all pizza. So we usually get a really good response to our survey. Support staff in tough times. So when our staff have a crisis in their life, a difficulty with a child or a parent passing or something like that, our community really, and it's usually their specific neighborhood team, they'll do things for them. They'll collect money and they'll buy them something of comfort, or we'll make a comfort basket. People will just bring in, maybe you'll bring a magazine and somebody else will bring a gift card and somebody else will bring some food, and we try and really show our warmth towards the staff at all times, but especially in tough times. We encourage third-party affirmations and descriptive appreciation. So an example of a third-party affirmation would be if I was introducing one of my staff and I said to the person I was introducing them to, this is Corey. And Corey is super skilled in negotiating problems with families and coming out with a win-win situation. And I would say that in front of Corey so that he would hear the things that I value in him and also just feel good about himself. So we encourage that. And descriptive appreciation, so that's linking what the person did to the impact it had. So, thanks for helping me put this presentation together. It is going to make me feel a lot more confident when I deliver it next week at the conference, because I know all of the pictures you found and all of the things that you've done to help me create this are going to make it a great presentation. So that's something you might say to somebody that helped you do that. We potluck dinners and opportunities to convene and laugh. So we have lots of encouragement of staff to have neighborhood parties and bring food. We have a lot of food at Sherbrooke. We laugh a lot, and you'll hear laughter coming from all areas of the building, and it's really encouraged. And people do better when they're having fun. Team building activities. I'm just going to kind of move through here. What you do speaks so loudly I cannot hear what you say. So this picture is actually one of those people is Suellen, and another one of our leadership team. It's an example of us participating. So they participated in the pie in the face activity. So just really just being part of the team and showing that everyone is just a person there, but an important person, and that everyone has their role to play. So I think we have another learning circle question for you. And it is, share ideas on how you warm the soil in your home. So if you just want to take a few minutes at your table and share an idea or two on how you warm the soil in your home. Okay, can we come back to the bigger group? So would anyone like to share something that you've done in your home to warm the soil that the rest of the group would be interested in? Any volunteers? Yes.
We're very multicultural in our home, and so we often have cultural shared lunches where staff or residents will bring in different foods. Their partners will go to the kitchen and cook their sort of native food and share with the residents. Everyone dresses up and shares their own culture and knows around everyone.
Really nice. For those of you who didn't hear, they have quite a diverse organization, lots of different people from different backgrounds, and they come together and have what we would call a potluck and bring dishes from different countries and share with each other. And I think the beautiful thing about that is you build relationships while you do that. So you get to know your coworkers better and you learn about them and you appreciate them. It actually causes less fighting and more cooperation. Those things that you do that may seem unrelated, but they build the relationships. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? Yes. Nice. It's nice that what they do is recognize, they have a core value board and they recognize their staff who are living the core values. Is that, I understand, up on that board. And then we'll have a draw and celebrate one of those people later on. It's a great way to recognize and reaffirm what you're looking for in staff, and then by default what you're not looking for. So that's really, really great. Yeah, one more.
So we all talk about simple pleasures for the elders. Encourage your care partners to learn each other's simple pleasures and give reward that way. It really makes it personal.
So if you didn't hear, encourage all of the care team, all of the partners. So the resident is one of those partners, but the staff around them are another partner, and encourage them to share their simple pleasures with each other. We have one of our managers created this document on our shared drive, and it is what everyone's favorite Tim Hortons coffee is. So we're in Canada, we're Tim Hortons addicts. I don't know what they put in it, but we have a spreadsheet. So if I wanted to buy one of my coworkers her favorite coffee, if I didn't know, I can go look on there and go buy it for her. Okay, so the key 3 is align everything to the mission, vision, and values. So Suellen went through our mission, vision, and values a little earlier. And so some of this work is a little bit boring administrative work. You need to go through, well, this one isn't boring, but this one is talking actually about the mission, vision, and values. So every staff meeting we have, we will highlight, we'll remind staff of the mission, and we'll talk about at least one value. And everything we bring to them, we'll talk about how that relates to one of our values. So it's keeping it in front of the staff constantly. plan and problem solve based on the mission, vision, and values. So if someone comes with an idea, a really great thing to do is to ask them how their idea aligns with the mission, vision, and values. And if it doesn't, it's probably not a road we should go down, or we should morph the idea into something that does fit with our mission, vision, and values. This is the boring administrative work. Ensuring that all policies, procedures, and position descriptions are aligned with the mission, vision, and values. So we regularly go through all of our policies and procedures and make sure that there aren't things in there that don't align with a value. So I found one just last year, I think it was. I was going through, I was looking for, some staff wanted to move elder into the easy living clothing. So those are the, oh, you probably all know what they are, but out of regular clothes into clothes that they could easily take on and off. And I was looking for our policy on it or our procedure on it, because there's a series of steps, and I couldn't find it. And so I went looking broader, and I looked in the support services manual, and that's actually, I found it. It was in the laundry section, and it said, if a resident needs adaptive clothing, step 1 is send it down to the seamstress to get it done. And I was thinking, well, that is odd. I'm sure that's not really what we do. And it's not what we do, but it's what we used to do. And then I never did find the policy, so we hadn't created one. So we created one, and step 1 is talk with the resident and their family about how you could make their current clothes work, or buy a bigger size, or get stretchier clothing, or get something that works better before you go into these more institutional types of dress. So we found something, we find it all the time, things that don't align or that we haven't changed. So that's the kind of administrative work that needs to be done there. I already talked about this, our annual reviews. So they're not performance reviews, but we take that opportunity to review mission, vision, values, domains of well-being, whatever we're working, we want to review with staff that year. Create codes of conduct and behavior expectations. So a lot of our neighborhoods have their own code of conduct. The staff come together and they'll agree on how they're going to act with each other, and then they'll sign off on it. So if there's anything that isn't in alignment with that, it's something for either the team to address, or if they can't, for the manager to address with the person not in alignment. And behavior expectations, we've created these as an organization. So for each value, we say what that looks like. So we say, let's say for accountability, it's that they would be accountable to the resident, they're accountable to their coworkers, they'll show up on time, they'll carry out their role as the primary care, whatever it is that we want them to expect their behavior to be. Okay, align our annual objectives with our core directions. So we have a strategic plan, and then we have annual objectives. So we make sure that those are in alignment, or they should be something we're not doing. Ensure all language is appropriate. So this is really critical, and sometimes people think it's not a big deal, but it really is. To change the language changes our thinking. So we really try and make our words as normal as possible, away from medical terms. So for example, we don't want to call people by their room number or their diagnosis, or that they're in a wheelchair, or whatever it is, their person. So we really work hard on that, and we correct each other gently. We correct each other, and we have games to replace words that don't fit. We just really work to work towards not dehumanizing people. So Suellen shared this example yesterday in our presentation. I'll share it again. We would call people admissions when they'd move in, or we have a new admission, and we really wanted to move away from that. So we want them to say, we have a person moving in today. But we see now that's been morphed into people being called move-ins. So I've got a move-in today. Well, it's no different. It's the same. It's no different than admission. There's no person there. So we try and correct. And I know with my team, when I'll correct, they'll say, well, I'm just in a hurry. I'm trying to tell you this in a hurry. doesn't take even one more second to say a person moving in. So we have to do constant work on that. Alter the physical environment. So we want to remove all signs of the institution and make it home, not home-like, but home. And so we want to remove carts, paging. We have removed all overhead paging, uniforms. You won't see a single uniform in either of our homes. You won't hear any overhead paging. You won't see bibs for the most part. You won't see a lot of carts. That's still a work in progress, but you won't see signs. You won't see medication carts. We don't have any. So we're removing all of those signs of the institution, and we do things in a different way. Develop accountability systems and QI, so it's really important to track all your outcomes, and we do that extensively. At Sherbrooke, it helps with alignment and accountability. Ensure all values are in place. So for a long time, we didn't have safety as a value, and for some strange reason, we ended up on this top 50 list that you don't want to be on, which is we were one of the had one of the highest injury rates as a healthcare employer in our province. So something we ended up not being very happy that we were on, and we looked at what we were doing, and here we're missing a core value of safety. And so we added that core value, and you can't just add the value, then we added all the pieces in around that, so that you do after incident review of every incident, you do weekly safety meetings, you do huddles daily to talk about safety. So we put the value in and then all of the processes to go with it. Transparency with plans, I've already talked about that. And discipline based on the values. This quote we love, what you permit, you promote. So we actually do a fair amount of disciplining of staff. And I think sometimes that can come across as harsh at first. We do progressive discipline, of course, and we would always rather educate, teach, coach. But when we've done all that and one of our values is violated or a policy is violated, we discipline. And often behavior will change, and if it doesn't, we continue, and then our desire is to have that person not be in our home anymore. And that sounds harsh, but you just can't have that when you're trying to build this intentional culture. You just can't stand by and watch that happen. So I would say the majority of the disciplining we do is we have zero tolerance for disrespectful behavior among any people in the community. So that's where the bulk of our work is done, in that area. So any type of rude comment to a coworker or to a resident or a family member is dealt with pretty seriously. And I think what we've got as a result is a really kind and respectful team of people. Okay, empower staff within the boundaries is key for. So this is the secret sauce of the Eden Alternative. When staff are empowered, they empower elders. And we've taken on, sort of over the last 5 years or so, kind of quite a different approach to our leadership style. And we use what's called a coach approach. And I'm going to go into quite a little bit of detail about what coaching is and give you a model that you can use and actually do a demo with you. And we think this is one of the most powerful pieces of work you can do, is coaching for empowerment. So I'm going to go into what is coaching, but just before we do that, well, before I do any more, just stand up and stretch, because we've been sitting here for a long time, or you have, and we've got about 40 minutes left to go. I know people have been kind of coming and going, and that's great. If you need to go leave for anything, just go ahead and do that, and then we'll get back on track. But please come back. The coaching demo is going to be fun. Okay, so what I'm going to ask for at the end of the coaching demo is, or not at the end of it, but when I get to at the end of teaching about the coaching model, is I'm going to ask for a volunteer to come up here and be coached. And so just start thinking about that if you'd be willing to spend like 10 minutes with me to have a coaching session done in front of everyone. And give a little bit of thought to a topic you might want to have some help on. So it can't be too broad, like not, world peace or something. It has to be a little, a tiny problem or something you're facing in your work life or your home life. So we're losing people. Maybe that was a bad idea. Okay, I'm going to go into what is coaching. Coaching is, this is a really big general term of what it is. It's unlocking a person's potential to maximize his or her own performance. So it is, you think of people in terms of their potential, not how they're actually performing. And what it requires is a really optimistic view of people. You really believe in your team and the people that you're coaching and what they're going to be able to do, not what they're currently doing. If you're an autocratic leader, this is really hard to shift to this way of leadership style. It will take you a lot of effort. And this is why. You traditionally, leaders like to give advice because we are good at what we do. We know how to do things. We know how to get it done. So our first instinct when a staff member comes to us is to give them advice on how to solve the problem or what they should do. It's really hard not to. And when I first started shifting to this style, if one of my team would come in and ask me what to do, they were used to me guiding them a bit more than I do now. And so they actually were quite annoyed with me and frustrated and would just say, well, why, just tell me how to do this and I'll do it. And I would just start asking them a lot of questions. And really coaching, it's sort of been made into a great big deal. Actually, it's just asking questions of people and helping them think for themselves. It's not really hard. It's not something that you have to be, trained as an expert in. You need to learn a little model and use it. This is really one of the beautiful things about coaching. If I give you my advice and it fails, you will blame me. I have traded my advice for your responsibility, and that is seldom a good deal. So as a leader, when you use a coaching style, you'll reduce your suffering a lot. You will not be sitting there trying to come up with ideas for your staff to use that you don't know if they'll work or not. You also won't get blamed when you give an idea and it doesn't work for them. So you will help them think. They'll have ownership of whatever they're choosing to do, and you will not suffer so much. So this is really the impetus for learning to coach. Questions are the answer. So asking questions is the most effective way to change thinking. And there's a lot of research out now. Quiet Leadership by David Rock is the one that I was referencing. And he's saying that traditional learning methods don't work that well, like lecturing and so on. And that's why we use lots of examples, pictures, different things. But actually asking questions, and that's why we're doing some of the learning questions, and that's the basis of coaching, is the way to get thinking to change and the way to help people improve their thinking. So asking questions. They generate awareness and responsibility. So there's one of my coworkers, I love coaching her because I'll ask her a question and she'll say, oh, how did you know that? And I don't know what it is, but it's something that she's now, by a question, just recognized in her mind that is actually what was her barrier. So it creates a lot of awareness. There's effective and ineffective questions. So effective questions are open-ended. So how, where, how, what types of things. What, where, who, how questions. Don't ask why or leading questions. So when I'm going to do the demo, you can watch for some of this to see if I do that or not. This I tossed in here for it's basically, before we go into coaching, there's two really big empowerment pieces, and one is the learning circle and the other is coaching. So I'm going to go through these quickly because we've already worked on those a little bit. This is the coaching model that I'm going to teach you, and it is in the public domain. It's in a lot of books. There's a good book by John Whitmore, and it really outlines the this coaching model. It's really easy to remember, and I love it because it's called Grow. And when it's a great fit with the Eden Alternative, which is all about helping people to grow. So I love this model, and it's one that anybody can use and access. There's lots of models, and there's lots that are copyrighted and or they're sold by different groups, and those are great too, but this is one that everybody can access, and it's very simple. So I'll go back one here. GROW stands for, the G is for goals. So at the start of the conversation, you find out what is the goal the person's working towards. And then the R is the reality. What's their problem? What's the current situation? The O is obstacles and options. So you identify what's standing in their way and then help them brainstorm a number of options, a number of different ways they can go. And at the end of that, you have them pick one option and discuss a way forward. Okay, you're going to do that. By when? And let's check in again next week and see if you've done it. So a lot of people say, why the goals before the reality? Like, why not just go right into what the big problem is? So when if one of you comes up here to be coached, I'll ask you what it is you want to talk about today, but then I'll ask you what you want to achieve by the end of the conversation. Because some people just, they want to come out with a plan. Some want to just say, I want to start thinking about this. Like, you want to know what is their end goal for the conversation. So these are the type of questions you'd ask in the goal setting part. I'd say, what do you want to talk about today? And for those of you who are out of the room, I'm going to ask for a volunteer, and so start thinking about something you might have as something you'd like to discuss. What would you like to achieve? Is that realistic? So if you came up here and said, I want to solve world peace, I would say, is that realistic today? No. Okay, well, what little piece of that could we take on? What little piece of that is local to you that we could formulate a plan for? Can we do that in the time we have available? So you might have to break things up. What would be of value for you to walk away with today? So you might tell me, I want to have 2 ideas to work on to manage my time better. We're going to go into the R, which is reality. So these are the types of questions you might ask your team member or whoever you're coaching. So what's happening at the moment? Like, what's causing you this distress or causing this problem? How do you know this is accurate? So some people might think the problem's bigger than it is. A lot of times that happens. Everybody has bad morale here. Everyone. Okay, well, who? Well, that one person that I talked to, they were so you want to know kind of how the person came to the conclusion that they did. What meaning are you giving to this? Are you giving more to it than there is or less? How important is this to you? What are the other factors involved? What have you tried so far to solve this? And what were the effects of that action? Well, those are some of the types of questions you'll see during kind of the reality stage. And this model is taught like linear, like you do goals, reality, options, way forward, but it sort of doesn't work exactly like that in a conversation. You'll kind of go back and forth between the different things. Obstacles and options. So these, when you move on to the next phase, you kind of establish, okay, what is the problem? And then we move, this is really forward moving. It's not, you don't get stuck on the problem, you keep this moving. So you really, force the person to think about, okay, well, we've got the problem. What are your options? You have them go through the pros and cons of each option. What might stand in your way? So what are some of the barriers you might face if you chose that option? What have you used in similar circumstances? So a lot of people, they actually have the skill they need to solve this. They've solved it before, maybe in a different way, but they think it's a new thing and that they can't solve. So you have them go back to, remember that, that happened one other time. What did you do that time? And who might be able to help you? So do you need some extra assistance? Who's the person who needs to help you? And then you ask, what option would you like to act on? So you get to the why, which is the way forward. Again, which option do you want to pursue? Will this meet the goal that we talked about at the beginning? So will this option you're choosing actually solve the problem that came within the goal you had in mind? What are the next steps? So you might ask them, what's your first step to getting there? What are the first 2 things you can do by next week to get this accomplished? When will you take those steps? And what support do you need? So do you want to meet with me again and we'll talk about, it's kind of an accountability. Do you want to talk about how you did on those steps or didn't do? And then rejig the plan. So, we could probably take about 10 minutes to do an actual coaching demonstration. I have no idea how it will go because I don't, but often you don't. And as the coach, you don't really need to know the person or the material. You don't have to be an expert in this. I did do a certified executive coaching program at Royal Roads University in Victoria. It's a graduate program in coaching, and the person I had to coach for in front of all the faculty as the final test, I have no idea what he was talking about. None. He was some kind of engineer, and he was problem solving this, I don't know. It was, but I didn't need to know the material because I'm not going to give him advice on the material. I needed to ask him questions to help him think through his problems. So you don't need to be a material expert or even know the person, really. You just have to kind of have a model and some questions. It doesn't always go good. I've had coaching sessions at work where you get stalled out on the goal on the first step. And that might happen, and then you meet again, and maybe next time you clarify it a bit. So it doesn't always work perfectly every time. So would anyone want, okay, come on up. Nice to meet you. Have a seat. I wonder, I know, maybe we should slide over, maybe to that edge, because this podium's blocking. Better? Okay, so thank you, Katie, for being brave and coming up here to talk with me today. So just to get going, what's on your mind?
Well, I would like to try to figure out, as far as, from the leadership perspective, I tend to be very task-oriented. So I tend to be more about the work than stopping along the way to engage people.
Okay, so in terms of what you're looking to improve, you're looking for a way to focus more on relationships?
Correct.
Okay. So by the end of our conversation, what would be of value to you to
leave the stage having?
I think it could be something as simple as figuring a way to walk away from a task sooner to go to the next without being rushed, so that if somebody needs something or they stop me or I just want to, I could stop and visit, whether it be a resident or staff.
Okay, so you want to figure out a way to sort of disengage from a task to focus on people. Okay, all right. So just tell me a little bit about your current style and what your current kind of reality is, what you typically tend to do that doesn't allow you to do that.
For instance, I will work, and I've been thinking about this a while, so I will work on a project at my desk up to the very last possible minute that I can leave to go to the next task, so that there's not a lot of lag time in between, this meeting or that, event. Or does that make sense?
Yeah. So what do you think's behind that? What do you think causes you to want to not have that little bit of space of time between the task and the next thing?
I got to get it done. I'm not kidding, I'm very task oriented. It's not that I'm not interested, it's just the task, getting the task done, especially if you have a lot of things on your plate, it's like, I think my main focus is more on the task than it is on what the task is about.
So what's been your experience when you haven't got a task done?
Probably a little anxiety about getting it finished, or if it's a presentation that I have to do, or help with an event, how is the event going to go, and am I going to get done in time? Is it going to go smoothly? Are things going to go as you hope they will go?
So what would be kind of your worst case scenario if you didn't get something done? What do you sort of envision would happen?
It wouldn't necessarily that I wouldn't be able to, that I'm not communicating what I'm trying to communicate, that it's confusing and disorganized. You want to be, if you're going to present something, you want to be able to convey it in a very, structured and organized way so that people receive the message that you're trying to convey.
Okay. So you're worried about, sort of concerned about clarity and making sure that you've got
making sure you're understood. There you go. Very good.
Making sure you're understood. So that's really important to you.
Apparently. Am I going to get a bill for this? Wow, talk about vulnerability. Wow.
It's really interesting what actually comes up, because it's often this is sort of outside the coaching, what we're just doing now, but what is initially what comes up as the problem isn't really the problem, it's something different.
Much deeper.
Deeper, right? Yeah.
That's probably why I volunteered to come up here.
Well, I'm glad you did. So it's important for you to be understood, and so you take a lot of time to make sure that you have things in enough detail then in your tasks.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, I do want to make sure that people also understand.
Right.
So there is that dynamic. It's not just about me.
Right. Okay.
I don't want people to walk away confused or, misunderstanding anything either.
Right. So have there been times when you didn't have the time you needed to get your task done, and not to the degree that you needed to, and then that things went badly as a result?
It depends on who you ask. Probably the people receiving would say no, but in my mind, I'd be like, no, I could have done this a little better, and I could have done that a little better type thing. But I think, so it kind of depends on who's filtering it.
Right. So it's more of an internal within you, sort of that voice that's saying, beaking all the time, just, wanting, recognizing the things that didn't go as well as you had envisioned them to go. But most people don't notice because they don't know what you had in your head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Have there been ways before when you've been able to separate the task and give yourself time to work on the relationships or have time for people? Have you been able to do that?
I have to make a concerted effort to do that. Like if I'm sitting at my desk working on something and a resident walks in, I've found where I have to literally, set your paper down, turn your body so that your body language is fully directed towards them, and quit looking at anything else and focus on what they're saying.
Okay. So we're kind of moving into, what are your options? And so you have one there that you've used before, taking that just kind of real concerted effort to do it. So training yourself basically. What else could you do?
I could definitely quit the working up to the last minute and be intentional, and getting up with the intention that I am going to talk to people as I walk down the hall to go to this or to go to that, and make it an intentional effort.
Okay, so creating some space between your task and the next thing.
Correct.
That's what I'm hearing. Okay, what else?
Make relationships an actual task.
Okay.
Ooh, that's a novel idea.
Yeah. So how would you do that? So you talk about kind of treating them with the same importance that you're treating your task. So how would you make that sort of a...
Right, because as I was listening to you, I'm thinking about different things that I could do to, maybe walk over to our long-term care and with the intention of finding out how the day's going for the people who work there, or possibly, somebody who's living there, just to see where they are in their day or in their, maybe in their life. It's like one day I was getting ready to leave the floor, the household.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the workers who had surgery on her shoulder, and it just dawned on me, stop and ask her about her shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
And wow, what a novel concept, right? Really not as harsh as I sound. And I did, and it was really interesting, how much she wanted to talk about it, and I think that made a big difference in her day.
Right.
So.
Okay, so you've got a couple options there.
Right.
Which one do you want to pursue?
I want to pursue the making it a task to be more relational.
Okay. So when you think about going back to work on Monday, if you are, in reality, what is your actual plan to make that happen? How will you stop yourself from doing the same thing and starting to work in a new way?
If I have to, I will put a calendar reminder that says, go be relational.
Okay.
And get up and go,
Okay, so that's your first step. You're going to put a calendar reminder.
Okay.
How long before how much time are you going to give yourself for this? 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Oh, no, I'm thinking more like, 30 minutes to an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so at least 30 minutes before your next thing, you're going to have a calendar reminder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It could be the first thing I do in the morning. So thinking about it, because for me that will be easier, because I won't get involved in something. If I make it the first thing I do, then I will go and do that. And then if I get involved in something later, I've at least accomplished that task.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got your way forward, your plan for Monday morning. You're going to put a calendar reminder in, and you're going to leave 30 minutes ahead and stop and talk to people.
Correct.
Okay. There we go.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Take care.
Oh, good luck. Thank you.
I might.
Okay, so that's coaching in a nutshell. And it's really just listening more than talking, which is hard for us, most of us. So be happy to answer. We're 15 minutes and we've got to finish this key and one more, so I'm going to go quick. And if you have questions about coaching in a little more detail after, I'll hang around here. So, of course, involve staff in decision-making. Ensure conditions of empowerment are in place. So the conditions of empowerment are information, skills, resources, support, and knowledge. If you've got one of those things missing, you cannot blame your staff for not being empowered. So you need to make sure they have every piece. That's the job of the leader. We've talked about learning circles already, annual reviews. There's quite a bit of crossover in some of these keys. Being transparent. Oh, and repeating. So we've talked about those also in alignment, but they also come into empowerment, having the information that you need to make decisions. We do Gemba walks, which we go, as part of Lean, we go to the area where the work's being done. That's a Toyota term. And so our leadership team goes to one neighborhood every week, and we ask the staff, what are you proud of here? What are your challenges here? Tell us about what it's like to work here. Tell us about your team. What are you proud of? What could you guys work on? And it's really valuable. So we make a point of doing that. Every member, our 6-member leadership team, we go together and do that. I'm sure all the values are upheld. And so this key 5, Suellen's going to do, it's about connecting actions to outcomes.
Okay, key 5 is really, it's the last key, and we've talked about a lot of these things already, and as Kim said, there are some overlap in these keys because some of the things you do actually fit the different keys in culture change, and the ones that keep repeating themselves are the ones that I think are really important. They reinforce what you're trying to do. So this one is connect staff's actions to the outcomes, and the example I really like is hand washing. And, you know, when you say to staff, when you wash your hands, we don't have any outbreaks. And so staff realize how important that is. Or, you know, when you do this, it really makes a difference to somebody. So letting people know that they really are important and what they do matters. We go back when we do these Gemba walks, which is a lean term. We do lean in our health district. We often go over the outcomes for the neighborhood. So if they have a high number of falls, or if they have really high engagement scores or those kinds of things, we can go through the outcomes during that Gemba walk. And it really makes important connections for them that we are actually paying attention to what they're doing. And that really matters to staff. It's interesting, one day it dawned on me that staff thought I knew everything, and that I carried this stuff in my head. And so I do tell them that I don't know everything and that they have to remind me and teach me and share with me. I ran into somebody outside of Sherbrooke and I said, "Oh, how are you doing?" And she says, "Oh, I'm so glad you asked." And she went into this long explanation of surgery, which I had no idea she'd had, right? But she made the assumption that I did. And that was my first clue that people thought you knew everything that was going on. And we have 600 employees, so that's too much for me. Communication and feedback, really, really important. We get moving so fast, sometimes we forget to go back to the staff and tell them what happened. Or, you know, this is what we got back from you. And this is such an important thing to close that loop. It's a terrible thing to ask people for input and then not get back to them. One time I explained to staff in a staff meeting, somebody was upset with me because they said, "Don't bother asking me what I think you should do if you're not going to do what I say." And I explained to staff when I'd asked many people, I got 8 different answers, and that you actually have to pick the best one. But when people realized that everybody was giving different input, then they said, "Oh, okay, yeah, you can't do 8 different things." So giving that information to staff. Kim talked about those third-party affirmations, and I think they just are so incredibly important. I used to use these with my son all the time. He'd come home with something that he'd done really great, and I wouldn't tell my husband privately. I'd always say, "Oh, you'd be so proud of your son. Brett's standing right here. Here's what happened today, and here's what he did. I know you're so proud of your son." And Brett would just beam. Well, all of us want that. We all want this affirming, and so that's something that we can make a real point of doing. Okay. Those are our 5 keys to culture change, and lead with a Whiteheadian style. That's the best summary I can give that. Warm the soil and build trust, and this is really about loving people, and as management does unto staff, social staff do unto elders. Align everything with the mission, vision, and the values, and that is really hard work. It takes years. Empower the staff within the boundaries of the values, and we didn't talk a whole lot about that, but I always say to staff, I'm not empowered to do whatever I want. You might think, you're the boss, you can just do whatever you want. I said, everything I do, I have to do within the boundaries of our mission, vision, and values. And by the way, everybody watches everything that I do. And so it does really matter what you do, but we're only empowered to do things within that framework. And so that's important for the staff to understand as well. And then lastly, help everyone understand and believe that they make a difference. Very, very powerful. So these are our 5 keys. And if you have the app downloaded for this session, Kim and I just shared one slide, and actually, Kim, can you bring me one? Do you have one? It's actually a chart that has all of this material under the 5 keys so that you can take it away and take that with you. So it looks like this, and so you should be able to find this on that app, and it's the very last slide. But it is the summary of what we do. So that leaves us about 10 minutes for questions, if anybody has any, or we could do one more learning circle. Yes, Jill? The Whiteheading approach is that coach approach. And I really do encourage you to look in the literature. There's the Newtonian approach and the Whiteheadian approach. And the Newtonian approach came about the time of Newton. And of course, Whitehead was the fellow who the Whiteheadian approach was named after. But it was a different view of people. The one view was that you had to really, really watch people and not trust them and tell them what to do and measure what they do. The Whiteheadian approach is really about coaching, setting people free, believing in them, that people are good, and then, not being irresponsible in any way, but really being in this together and working as a team. So very different approaches. And so I do encourage you to look in the literature, and there's a nice little article in there comparing the 2 styles of leadership. But the one that Eden is promoting really is that Whiteheading approach, and I realize people probably haven't heard that term before. Thanks. Clear as mud? Our retention rate, I just looked at it for the last 7 years. I actually have it going back 20 years, but I looked at the last 7 years just because they happen to be the one on the form. And it's about 93% of our staff in permanent positions. Where we struggle is with casual staff because they can't get a job. So we hire people, and then they get a job somewhere else. We hire more people, they get a job somewhere else. And then lots of people, when they get enough seniority, because we are unionized, then they will bid back into our organization. So we actually don't have a choice about who comes to work with us because of the union, but we make it very clear to people what kind of a place we are, so people make their own decision before they come whether they want to accept a job. And that seems to be a very empowering way, actually, of getting somebody to commit to the culture. So, anybody else have a question? Yes? Do we do the coaching on a regular basis or only as requested? As Kim has taught us, everything is not a coaching situation, right? So in order to be coaching somebody, they really want to solve a problem for the most part, and the coach helps them to do that. So I know Kim meets with her managers on a regular basis, and there's always coaching that happens there. I would coach somebody usually when they come into my office with a problem. But Kim coaches me, we coach across, we coach up, and it becomes a really nice way of just, as Kim says, helping people to think. And so, when staff come with a problem, for example, we're out of soaker pads again. In the old management style, the manager would phone down to the laundry and say, we're out of soaker pads. In the new style of coaching, you'd say, can you tell me more about the problem? Has this happened before? Like asking a bunch of questions. When you run out of soaker pads, what is it that you've done in the past? What worked? What are your options? Well, what do you think is the right way forward here? So even on a little problem like that, you can do a bit of coaching. I mean, you can even do it when somebody's thinking about dyeing their hair. I mean... you can coach about really simple things, right? So, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I know that Kim will be available, and so will I. We're going to be breaking for lunch right away, and we are very excited to come back here at 2 o'clock to hear Mel and... now, what's your name, new CEO? Jill. Mel and Jill are going to give us a really, really exciting afternoon, and I know there's going to be lots in it for people to take away to care for themselves as well. So we're pretty excited to come back here at 2 o'clock. So we'll see you all then. Thanks so much for your attention.